Well, we're back again, and I was thinking about relationships and dating, and so many people say it's so hard to meet somebody, and I don't know how the young people date today. I think they date in groups or something. I don't know if they go on one-on-one actual dates or what's happening on that scene. But one of the things I have always enjoyed doing is putting people together, and I seem to have a knack for it. And the first time I did this on any kind of a scale other than one-on-one or two-on-two was my junior year of high school in Kansas City. And there was a lovely young man named John Seitz, who's, I think it was his grandmother aunt, one of them lived across the street from us. And I saw him out shoveling snow, and I thought, oh, he's cute. I haven't seen him before, so I have to go out and shovel our snow and get to meet him. And we hit it off. And when he was up in town, we would go out. So he called me one day and said that his fraternity, Delta Upsilon, DU, was having some kind of a special weekend where they pledges kidnap some of the upperclassmen and take them somewhere where they don't know where they're going. And they wanted to bring them up to Kansas City because he and several of the others had homes up there where, they could accommodate some guests and all. And could I get dates for a group of them? Now, I've never met, I knew one of them. One of them was from our high school, and his brother was in my class. As I've talked about the Montgomerys on my Southwest High and all the 26 people I found for our reunion. One was Bob Montgomery. Well, Bill was 2 years older, and he was a DU. He and Johnny were the same age and the same fraternity. So I did know him. But I said, sure. So we're juniors in high school, and some of my friends were sophomores. And these guys are freshmen through seniors, including Dick Wendelberg, who was the president of the DUs at that time. So they kidnap the guys, and they come up, and they have figured out, well, the Montgomerys had a wonderful house to have parties, so we could go there and put records on and dance and what have you. My mother and their mother were good friends, and they loved to have the kids in, both my parents and theirs, because then they could keep an eye on us, and they knew what we were up to. So we did some things there, and I think we maybe all went to the movies one night or something, but I rounded up. I got Heather Graham, one of my dear friends even today, for Graham Hellman's doc, and I got Jane Tasker to go out with Wayne Black, and with Bill Klaus from St. Louis. I fixed him up with Judy Hitchcock, and I got Monica Mays for for Mark Henderson. So when I met the guy, I met them first, and I had picked the girlfriends I wanted to have come. They were all fun and nice people and liked to dance and have a good time, but they were all just wonderful people. So I met them first, and then I met the guys, and then I decided who would be paired up. Well, the guy who was the senior, a college senior, he was really upset that they were fixing him up with what happened to be Marcia Bricky, who was a junior in high school. So here he is, about 21, and thinking, I've got a date with this 16-year-old. Some of them were not, and Mark Henderson, some of them were not too happy with what was going on. But I had such a quality group of girlfriends, and lovely, even to this day, lovely people, that it ended up, they enjoyed it so much that on their own they were coming back up, or as a group sometimes they would come back up and take them out. They had a wonderful time and stayed in touch for a while with them. So it was a huge success. And that following summer, when we were all out of school, a lot of them were Dell Ellis and Wayne Black, and Johnny had some, the family there and all. So a bunch of them would be there in Kansas City, and we partied all summer long. We had a wonderful time. And after I moved to California, our parents sent my sister and me back. That was fun. We took the train with the dome car so we could see everything. We came the northern route across Utah and the Salt Flats and all one way, and the southern route through Arizona and New Mexico the other way. And that was a lot of fun. But Jane Tasker, one of my best friends, who was fixed up with Wayne Black, her parents hosted a lovely, they had a big room where we could dance and all. And we had a lovely party with all the DUs there and my friends. And Judy Hitchcock, who's still a friend to this day, she said that thanks to me and knowing the DUs, that she went out with a couple of them, and that made it the best summer she ever had. in Kansas City, and she had not expected that. So that was my first time. I fixed up about 10 or 12 of them, and they all had a great time and continued seeing each other and staying friends. Well, the next time I had that opportunity was when I was at the University of Kentucky, and I was in Blazer Hall. I did not live in the sorority house. I lived in a dorm where you had no radios, we had no phones except a hall phone, and you had to agree to study and have peace and quiet there. But I thought we need to have some fun too. So I said, the sororities have formals. One of our Delta Gammas was the niece of the governor of Kentucky at that time. So we had our spring formal at the governor's mansion, which was exciting. But I felt bad for the girls who were not in sororities because the campus was not hosting formals like that where they would have an opportunity to dress up and go dance to a live orchestra. So I was head of the social committee at Blazer Hall, and I said, why don't we have a formal for the hall? And they said, the school said, everybody has to agree. You can't do something that not everybody is willing to participate or thinks it's okay or whatever. So we have a big hall meeting, and I don't know, we probably had 120 people or something like that in that dorm. It was a new dorm, and I can't remember exactly, but we had a lot of people. And so we're sitting there, and a whole group of them were objecting. And they said, and I was told by the dean of women herself and the head of the woman who was our house mother, Mrs. Nelson, if you don't have everybody in agreement, it's no deal. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what are the objections? The first objection was they thought they wouldn't have something to wear maybe. And I said, there are enough of us here in the dorm who have more than one party dress that we can share, and I'm sure we can get everybody outfitted. And everybody agreed. We'd all, because we're all friends and having to live there in the dorm for 2 years together. And so we all said, yes, we'll all figure out what people can wear. Okay, problem solved there. The next one was about 30 of them said, I have no one to ask, I don't date, I blah, blah, blah. I opened my big fat mouth and said, I promise to get every single one of you a date if you'll say yes to this. And so I had to call them the Sigma News, who were across the street and were good friends, and a few other fraternities where I knew the guys really well. Excuse me. But I managed to get all 30 girls a date, or we could not have had the party. And the other roadblock, we had our first, this was 1962, December of 62, we had our first black student on campus, and it was a young woman in our dorm. And the dean of students calls me over and said, Nancy, you realize that there was only one hotel in Lexington in those days, and it was right on the main street downtown. I can't think of the name of it, but it was very well known back then. And they said, Nancy, there's some issues, and if you can't resolve it, now I'm just a senior in college, for heaven's sakes. They're telling me if I can't resolve it, there's no dance after all we've gone through. And I'm like, well, what's the problem now? They said the hotel will not allow blacks to come. And I thought, oh my word. I hadn't thought about that because I hadn't been in a situation where I had to think about that before. And I'm like, okay, I was not going to let this dance fall apart for everybody because of that issue. So I got one of the other committee members to go with me, and down we went. I found out who was the head of the hotel who made that decision, and I asked for a meeting. And I explained how this person and her date had to be allowed to come. I didn't care if she was purple, orange, from China, India, or what. She had to be allowed to come with her date, or we had to cancel the whole thing, and everybody would be so disappointed. And it took quite a bit of talking. I mean, they didn't just roll over and play dead and say, oh, sure, you can do that, because we're talking about a major social issue change. And in Kentucky or any southern state or a lot of other states, that was a big step. And they agreed to let her and her date come. So that was a big step. And I don't know what I said. I mean, how many years ago? That's 62. That's 60 years ago. I don't know what I said to them or how I said it. But somehow I was determined to be persuasive enough that they would let us have this dance. After I'd gotten all these girls figured out who could wear what and gotten 30 dates, I wasn't going to let it get stopped then. So that's just one of the many instances where don't take no for an answer. That's one of the things I say throughout my book. There are more times when somebody said no for something, and I said, I know there's a way around this. I know that no is not the answer. We can make this happen. You just have to find a way. And there's an old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. So if you believe in something enough and you have the energy and decide you'll do it, you can make it happen. So we had the dance and it was grand. The next time I put together, well, there were a couple of times on campus. The Sigma News were having rush week, and all the young boys were coming in to look the campus over and look there. And their house was right across from our dorm, so that was easy. So they said, Nancy, we helped get you those dates. Now, this was in the spring. We need you to round up some young girls, some pretty girls, to go out with these high school seniors who are coming over. Of course, you know how much a college girl wants to go out with a high school senior she doesn't know. But anyway, I did it. However many, it was 25, 30 again. However many, I managed to get all the sororities to send their pledges, because they were all freshmen, send the pledges to go out with these guys. And then the next thing that happened, I'm down at Florida State, and I am acting as the rush chairman, because you had to have somebody who was not a student, and I was a student, but I was a graduate student. And there were only like 3 or 4 Delta Gamma adults down there. And they all said, we've worked so hard. You're new, you're fresh and rested. You're our rush chairman. I'm like, okay. And so I got to know the girls pretty well. And even though I didn't live in the house or go through rush with them or anything. So they were having, in the spring, they were having a big party out at the lake. It was a whole weekend of activities out at a lake near the campus. And I had, after a football game one day in the fall, we had a place called the Sweet Shop in Tallahassee, where everybody would go for sodas and malts and conversation and what have you, all during the week, but especially after the football games. So I go over, and I see some really good-looking guys on the step, and I thought, I've never seen them before. Where did they come from? So, of course, I have to go over and introduce myself and find out who they are. And it turned out they were Marines, and they were over in the down toward Destin, that area. There's a big Air Force base down there, Eglin Air Force Base. And they were training to be helicopter pilots. Now, this was 63, summer of 63. So this would have been Vietnam time. And that's where a lot of them were headed when they got trained to fly helicopters. And, they were wonderful young men. Whitey, his name's William Whitehill Dunphy. They called him Whitey. He now goes by Bill or William. He was a Dartmouth graduate, and one of them was a Harvard graduate, and one was a Johns not Johns. Anyway, they all came from very good schools, and had their degrees, and now they were officers in the Marines. So the spring dance comes, and the sorority said to me, Nancy, some of the alums are coming back. They'd be like your age or maybe a year younger or whatever, but they want to come back. But the people they dated graduated and went off. They have no one to go to the parties with and dance with and all. Can you help? So I called Whitey and I said, can you round up? I said, there are going to be 10 girls. And they're alums, and 2 were in the house. One was the vice president of the chapter. She was a senior, and then another one in the chapter, and then the other 8 were alums coming back. And I said, I need 10 of your friends to come over. Well, you're going with me. Bring 9 friends. No, bring 10 for the 10 girls. And it'll be a fun party. You'll have a good time. So they show up, and I meet most of the guys for the first time, and I meet most of the girls for the first time. So I meet 10 names I have to remember on the men's side and 10 on the women's side. Well, I knew 2 of the girls, the 2 who were there, and I knew 2 of Whitey's friends. But I amazed myself. We were standing in the Delta Gamma living room, and I went all the way around the circle, introduced all 20 people, and didn't miss a name. People said, you ought to run for politics if you can do that. But we had a wonderful time, and a couple of them stayed in touch for a while. So that was fun. And then when I moved to Atlanta, I started introducing people. I love putting together people for dates, for parties, whatever. And the first couple I introduced was at Kentucky. She was a sorority sister, Susan Holden, and his name was Tommy Ham. He was a Sigma Nu. And I had a date or two with him, and I thought, he's a sweet person. He's really nice, but he's not for me. And, you can tell pretty quickly if it's somebody you really want to keep dating or what. But doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the person. It's just how you and that person interact. So I said they would be perfect together, and I introduced them. Do you know that would have been like 1962 or 3, and here we are in 2023. So 60 years later, they are still married. They got married. They lived in South Carolina for a long time. I used to see them there. Now they're out in the Denver area. But that was one of the first couples, and I was so happy that they've had a wonderful life and wonderful children together. And then in Atlanta, I started introducing people. And all in all, I have introduced 33 couples through the years who have gotten married. And through different ways. One, Dave Nichols, he was an advance man for Reagan, and I worked for Reagan on the 76 and 80 campaigns here in Georgia. And I got all of these people involved helping me, and this couple had this beautiful daughter. She was a debutante and beautiful blonde named Becky Jo. And I introduced her to Dave because we were having a party, and my friend Phil Crane, who was a congressman, was speaking at it. And I said, Dave, you work so hard. You need a date. I have this pretty young blonde, and let me introduce you. Her name's Becky Jo Dilcher, and you've met her parents because they've helped me with Reagan. So I fixed them up. And sure enough, they ended up getting married. In fact, we were doing a fundraiser party, and several of us, we did like a carnival or something, and several of us were gypsies reading palms, and several of us could really read palms. We were having fun with that. And I told her, I said, you two are going to get married, and I see you moving to Denver. They did get married and moved to Denver for a while, and they're still together. They live in Sandy Springs, Georgia now. So it was wonderful things like that. I love seeing people happy, and I just have an instinct for who will go well together. I introduced an Air Force officer to one of my good friends in Washington, and she worked in education with me, and they got married happily and all. So it's very rewarding when you can put people together and it works and they end up happy. I was a bridesmaid a lot because I ended up in the weddings of the ones around here. I have a whole closet full of my old bridesmaid dresses, but that was a lot of fun. And now I don't have parties where I'm trying to introduce people like that. Now I'm trying to get them to go to music venues with me and hear music. And I had met a wonderful group called the Hot Sardines on a cruise I was on, and they were coming to Atlanta. They do Dixieland like the old style from Paris in the 1910s when Hemingway was there and Gertrude Stein and what have you. And I rounded up 14 people. I got out a feather boa and all rounded up 14 people to go hear them here in Atlanta. So I love putting people together for music, but I don't try and date match people up anymore. Well, I'm not out running around that much to parties where I'd be meeting single people to do that, for one thing. But it's been fun. I've enjoyed that aspect of life, and so it's just a little sideline here while I'm on the camera today. And just thought I would throw that out and share those stories with you. Okay, see you next time. Bye.